Go back where you can go into the park in the middle column of Little Pigeon River into an area called Greenbrier Cove. This is where my grandfather was born. This is him, Carlin Ownby to the right, and then his parents, Robert Columbus Ownby and Emma Whaleys. The cemetery, just like the old Wild Oaks Flat Cemetery, the old cemetery in the Greenbrier is called the Plymouth Cemetery. A lot of the old patriarchs or the matriarchs are buried there. I've got a picture of the headstone for William M. Whaley, Mary Ann Whaley, and John Ownby Jr. He was the first Ownby to come into the Greenbrier and Smoky Mountain area. A few years later, his nephew, John Ownby, also came in, and he's the one that married Mary Coon, if you've ever heard of the name Mary Coon. And so a lot of folks are descended from that side. I come from John Jr. So Aaron was John Jr.'s son. He looks like a pilgrim. Here's the reason he's dressed up in that outfit. He was the justice of the peace up in the Greenbrier area. And then Bullhead Whaley to your right, they were brothers-in-law. When the Ownbys came in, John Jr., he had Aaron, Amos, John Humphrey Ownby, and for some reason everybody just kind of nicknamed him Humpy John Ownby. He wasn't humpback or anything, they just called him Humpy John Ownby because his name was Humphrey. And then he had two daughters, Warning Ownby and Peggy Ownby. There's probably some other children, but these are the ones I know about. And Bullhead, or John Henry Whaley, he married Warning Ownby, Aaron's sister, and then one of the other ones, Harkless Teal, he married Peggy Ownby, and they lived over in the upper part of Sugarlands. If you used to go up in the Rainbow Falls area, up in that trailhead, that's kind of their area. So here's that picture one again with Martha Jane and all of her grandsons from the Whaleys. That's trying to prove that one in there because we're in Greenbrier now. So the Whaleys of Greenbrier pretty much all came from all of these guys that you see pictured. And I've just found that recently. I was always wondering where Aaron Whaley, not Aaron Ownby, where Aaron Whaley lives. And Ed Fleming, he was sharing some with me about that, so I appreciate his input. He was more down in the Glades area and Emmerick's Cove on the lower end of Greenbrier. He eventually did move up in the Greenbrier area with a couple of his sons. Middleton, too, he actually goes to Baptist Church up there. So here we have Aaron Ownby at the top, Aaron Whaley below him. We've got a lot of Aarons here, okay? Their two children, seen to the right of Aaron Ownby at the top. Aaron's daughter, Aaron Ownby's daughter marries Aaron Whaley's son. The reason I've got those two pictured there is they both were midwives in the Greenbrier area. You'll usually hear of a man being a midwife, but John Dudley was his name. He was a midwife as well as his wife. And a lot of the ladies up in Greenbrier were trained by the doctor that would come up in there to be midwives. You go through the midwifing class, I guess is how you'd say that. And so to the right is, again, Sarah Ownby, which is Aaron's wife. She was a daughter of Granny Coon and John Ownby. And here she is with 5 of her sons. Middleton, too, is not pictured here. Now, something interesting about John Whaley, you had, as the Ownbys came in, most of the lower part where the ground was a little bit more level was already occupied. So when the Ownbys came in, they had the upper Porter's Creek area. That is Julia Bracken. Her dad was the first Bracken to come into the Smokies. His name was Andrew Jackson Bracken. He brought his family in to really try to avoid the Civil War. He didn't want to get his family involved in the conflict. And so while Pinckney was growing up in the Sugar Lands area, and Julia Bracken was growing up over there as well, that's when they met and married, had most of their children, and then they came back when they were able to purchase this land. So let's talk about Phoebe just a moment. So here's Phoebe later on in life with all of her children. And this is, it was her oldest son or second son, but he had a cabin above Phoebe and Mac. There was Phoebe and James, and his name was Mac Whaley. And some people, the old timers around here, know the story of a spring that ran up there. They call it, some people call it the Fittified Spring, some people call it the Spasmodic Spring. But this spring was a bold spring when Mac first moved up there. It's the furthest cabin up, as far as I know, up in the Indian Nation. But it was raining good and strong, built a house there, built a cabin. And then one day he was wanting to water his cattle, and there was no water coming down from the spring. He had a little trough that he worked down where the cattle could feed. And so he's kind of fussing at his wife, what's happening with the water here? And she says, well, it's not running. He couldn't believe it. He goes up there. When he gets up there, by the time he gets up there, the water's running again. Well, there had been an earthquake that year. And after the earthquake, that spring, the reason they called it spasmodic, it would run for 15 minutes, and then it wouldn't run for 15 minutes. I think that's right, that's what they were thinking. And so it's almost like clockwork. You could set your clock by it. It would run, and then it would stop. And people used to come from all over just to watch that spring. It was like, well, the first wonder in the world here. And so the old cow, it just kind of knew the timing of the spring. It'd go up there to the spring. It'd just wait, because it knew sooner or later that thing was going to kick on and give it some water. So they had a cow train with it too. The other daughter, Sally, she's next to get married. And she married a gentleman by the name of William McKinley Whaley. Now, most people know William McKinley as Vanderbilt Whaley. Well, you got so many Williams, you got so many Johns, everybody gets tagged their name. You had Speckled Bill Whaley, Whitehead Bill Whaley. You just had to have a designation so they know which Whaley you're talking about. If you said William, remember William M was the first one to come over. 10 times out of 9, somebody's going to be named William, right? So Vanderbilt was quite an industrious person. He went over and worked in some of the mines in Upper East Tennessee, made some money. And he went over also into kind of telecom planes up the Copper Hill area when they were putting telephone lines in. So he even worked the phone company over there, hanging with the old open wire. So when he come back, he had a little money in his pocket. And people thought, man, you went up there and got rich. You just like the Vanderbilts, right? So they started naming Vanderbilt Whaley after the Vanderbilts over there. He moves from that area next to Phoebe and ends up buying the old Joel Whaley place. Remember I told you that Joel buys land, Pinckney buys land, 500 acres each. Well, Joel, Pinckney built a home where his dad had his cabin burned. Joel moves into Humpy John's old cabin. It's still there in very good shape. And he lived there, and when he passed away, he left it to his son, and his son sold it to Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt really built a place. He had a sawmill. He used sawmill lumber to build him a nice house. That's what he and Sally are sitting in front of here in the seated position. That's Vanderbilt with Sally sitting in front of the house. But look how he's decked out here in this picture when he's younger. He's really dressed to the teeth. His father was the Reverend George Bradford Whaley. George Bradford was the pastor of the Primitive Baptist Church in the Greenbrier area. And this photo here with the quilt in the background, that's the old cabin they built. That's where they were living at the time. When most of these were the first 7 children Sally had when they lived in Indian Nation over across from Phoebe. I've got a picture of Doc's Motel here, and the reason I do is if you look at this little girl right here in the middle, her name is Maureen Whaley. Pointer work, that's her right there. She's the one that built and started Doc's Motel, which is still there in Townsend. And her granddaughter, Sharon Stinnett, still runs that hotel today, so we're still 3rd generation. Nice place. She's got I think she's the only one that's got cabins you can rent right on the river, part of the motel there.
What hotel?
Pardon?
What hotel is it?
Doc's, D-O-C-K-S. It's in Townsend.
TLC?
Township, Tennessee.
Dock of the bay.
Just past the traffic light.
Yeah, just past the traffic light. If you're coming into township from there, the traffic light, you take a left to go 321, just go through the traffic lights, you're on the left toward the park. Very good place. Yes. So here we have a picture. The reason I got this photo up here, the Whaleys brought a singing style in the Greenbrier called old harp singing. The Whaleys still have their reunion. Me and my sister attended it this past summer, and they didn't have pianos and organs up there in Greenbrier in those days, so they sang a cappella. Everybody had their part. So if you used to sing the old church music, you had an alto, a bass, a soprano, and a tenor, right? So you had your parts, and they would all harmonize, and it's real pretty singing. But the lead, he'll just start out with this kind of a chant singing your part for you, and he'll make a round with all the sopranos singing, and then he'll go back and sing the tenor's part, and all of them will join in, and then he'll go back and he'll sing the alto's part, and all of them come in. Pretty soon you have them all singing in harmony a cappella. So it's kind of neat. You can go back if you want to hear that singing. They do it every year at the Whaley reunion. But half the gentlemen in this photo are Whaleys, and they used to teach that there. Now, my grandfather again, in this photo, this is the map picture of Greenbrier Cove. And most of the hikers that go back in there today, they use this map because it's laid out so well they can go find the old home places and the remains and know where things were. The photo to the right of it is the store that his father built with Davis Martin, and on the hill above it is the Friendship Baptist Church. I'm going to show you a slide next, and this picture was taken from the front of the schoolhouse looking up to the hill, looking across Porter's Creek. This is the store with Robert Columbus, my grandfather's dad, on the left. That's his dad, father on the left. And then his brother-in-law was Davis Martin on the right. They got the post office put in their store, and Davis Martin was the mail carrier for there. He delivered mail on horseback. They said that Davis had his horse trained so well that sometimes he'd just kind of go to sleep on the route riding, and the horse would go to stop whenever he came to home and he was delivering mail, and he'd wake up Davis and then get off and deliver mail. Kind of laid back in those days. So here's Greenbrier, and we'll point over here. That's the schoolhouse that they were standing at. There's the top of the store. This picture's made looking from the church down. Okay, now we're on the hill where the church was. I'm looking at back at the school. To the left of it is Joe Whaley's store, and then he's got a little bitty hen house right there, and then he's got a grist mill right there on the river. So, Greenbrier Cove. This is about the only picture I know that really shows sort of the whole cove. But what I'm going to show you next, well, I got a little baptizing to do. This is where they forded the river, where they would have the churches baptizing. But here I cropped in the LeCotte, the Hotel LeCotte, in the bottom right-hand corner, into that same photo. See that schoolhouse above and the doorway and the two windows? If you look down in the bottom floor of that hotel, you'll see that that school is the door and the windows. They put a second floor on it and made the LeCotte Hotel. So what they did, Kinsey Whaley and his uncle Wes Whaley, who had a sawmill, they bought the school, turned it into a hotel. That used to be the only way you could go in and hike in Mount LeCotte at the time, back in that day. And so you could literally stay in the hotel for, I think, $1.75 a day, and if you want to pay a whole dime, you could get a meal too. So they built that little kitchen annex over to the left. There's no car that sits, I don't know if you can tell, there's a car sitting in front of that annex on T-Model Ford. They would use it. People would either come into Sevierville on the train or people living in Sevierville, but they could pick them up in that car and bring them up to the Hotel LeCotte, and then they had horses. They could ride horseback up into Mount LeCotte.
Was that a picture of Cass Walker, the grocer, being baptized?
Yes.
Wow.
And also the White Cap, right?
Yeah, oh yes.
I didn't go into there, just not enough time, okay? But there is a book on the White Caps. You can read all about that guy that got baptized. It's another story, but if you can find the book on the White Caps, it's very, very interesting read. One of our kinfolk, Laura Whaley, was killed by those guys. So I've got you now we've got a wooden bridge going across Porter's Creek. There's the hotel. If you go across on the modern day stone bridge and just pull into a little parking area there's an iron gate that you can just kind of pull up to. And that's the beginning of the trail that will take you back to the Plymouth Cemetery. Remember, we talked about a lot of patriarchs and that buried in that cemetery. Well, I cropped in, I didn't do a good job, but I cropped in the schoolhouse that was built later. And if you walk back from your parking at, you're just right in front of where that hotel was, literally right in front of it. If you walk a little ways and go up the hill, you can see those columns. See those columns sticking up in that schoolhouse? They're still standing there today. Those columns.
Now, is that the Ramsey Cascade?
No.
No, it's not.
That's in Greenbrier.
Well, no, that is the Ramsey Cascade Road. When you cross that bridge, you have to go a long ways to go like
False,
that.
yeah, wrong.
Yeah. So are the columns from the hotel?
No.
Columns are from the school. If you're a big Facebook follower and watch all the hikers, they get that confused. They'll have you believe it's the hotel. It's not, it's the school. From the school. Plymouth Cemetery is a good hike. It's not far back there. It's a beautiful cemetery. So I just threw in, here's going to Ramsey Cascade, but you got to go quite a ways to get to it. And in the Greenbrier Baptist Church, when you turn up the trail, you're literally going between the columns of where the Greenbrier Baptist Church used to sit. The old remains kind of, some of it still sits there if you look really good. It's kind of hard to see, hard to find. And then later on, the CC, this is not a good picture, but see that CC camp with the arrow? Down here is the hotel, church, and store down there. They're kind of fuzzied out. We were going to point for these guys. There's the CC camp. This is the hotel, the church on the hill, and then the store right below it. So if you go past, don't take left across the bridge. Keep going up Porter's Creek, and you'll come to the CC camp remains. There's a pavilion there for the CC camp. It used to be located.
Can you orient again?
Pardon?
You're on Porter's Creek Road.
Yes, Porter's Creek, thank you.
So-
That's Porter's Creek going up right here.
Okay,
Ramsey Cascades would be this direction.
okay.
So that pavilion is where they have the Whale reunion. It's right there, basically across the roadbed. If you look for the river, you'll find the CC camp remains. Part of the corner of one building is right there on the pavilion. It's a good little hike. I plan on going back up there. Ed's going to, Fleming's going to lead a hike up that way a little later on with the Hikers Club.
Did you go up Great Yard Bridge to get to the CCC? It's right on the road?
The store set at Greenbrier Bridge Trailhead,
Okay.
and then if you go up on the hill, that's where the Friendship Church was, and the Whaleys Cemetery sits up there off Greenbrier Bridge. Some people call it the church cemetery, but really the Whaley Cemetery. But you're going with the road and not the trail. It's a good question, I'm glad you asked.
The pavilion where the bathrooms are. That's where you have the review.
Yes.
Got it now.
Glad you called the bathrooms really just outhouses. They smell to it. They were close to have a bathroom there. So now let's move out of Greenbrier and come into the Sugar Ranch. How am I doing on my time? What time is it? Time check?
143.
1:43. I got 15 minutes. I'll be fast. I'm going to skip on to this next slide because it's a map. If you come out of Gatlinburg, here's Gatlinburg coming in, and then we'll turn up and go 441 all the way up to the chimneys and Newfound Gap. Let me do it on this side as well. Here's Gatlinburg. We'll come in and go 441 all the way up to the chimneys, Allen Cave Trail, and 441. You've got Fighting Creek. This is actually Fighting Creek, but this is Asharper Creek. The Fighting Creek Road kind of parallels going up this way, going back to, everybody knows Laurel Falls, right? That's what Fighting Creek is, going to Laurel Falls. So let me come back just a moment to where I lived. Wheel too much. This is the Joel Carr farm. This is his barn. And you're looking back up to Mountain Cotton, back down. That's 441. We run right up through here. That is where today's visitor center sits, right there where that barn is. That's what it looked like before the visitor center. Sugar Ranch Visitor Center. Probably should have clarified that. Should have Sugar Ranch Visitor Center. And then here's the map. This area is sort of the lower end. I'll give you a better picture later, but this is Sugar Ranch Valley, as they call it. And then you're going up and you get into the chimneys. And then this little area right here is Sugar Ranch Branch. That's where my grandmother was born. So let's start out with the very top up to where the chimneys are. Okay. A lot of you, most of you in this room are probably familiar with Newfound Gap, the Newfound Gap Road. You go from Gatlinburg to Cherokee. Does that sound familiar? Going across the mountain, it's Newfound Gap. Before Newfound Gap Road was put in, there used to be an older way to get across the mountain. The original way was the way the Indian warrior path was, called Indian Gap. And it was really just a horse trail, walk it, horse trail, big game trail. And so during the Civil War, General Thomas widened it and made it a wagon trail so they could have some, move artillery and things across the mountain if they needed to. I don't know if they ever did it, but they widened it to go across there. And then later on, the Dicus Construction Company was contracted to build a road in 1928. The locals just call it the 28 Road. Most others today see a map that's the Dicus Construction, same road. But it went up to the chimneys, and you'll see in this picture, when we try to point, it's really hard to see. There's a bridge going across the river right there. This is the road coming up from the Sugarlands Visitor Center to the river. The bridge crosses, it's a big switchback, and it goes all the way up this way. Same thing over here, let me show you. Coming up from the Sugarlands Visitor Center, the bridge, switchback, and then going on up to the chimneys. Past the chimneys up to Newfound Gap, Island Cave, parking lot, and so forth. Well, the Cole family lived in literally where Chimney's picnic area is today. Their farm was kind of on the upper end of the picnic area. And I've tried to work in here. That's actually the brackets out, but if you'll look really close, you might see some barns and things. But I'll get you a picture. Just right now, we're going to talk about John Pinckney Cole, first of the Coles to come in. His son, Bill Cole, we'll talk about a little later. His son, Steve, we'll address later. Mary J. Cole, she's the mother of Alex, and then Joseph was a brother also to Bill. So these are the children of the original Cole community. So this is Bill Cole. And if you look at his barn, you see the chimneys up there right behind the barn, the old mountain. And if you look at his home, to the left, you can see one corner of the chimneys. Well, Joseph and Bill kind of had their farms up in there, and they called, most people just nicknamed it the Goober Farm. The Goober Farm. Do y'all remember that little song, Eating Goober Peas? Goodness, how delicious eating Goober Peas. Well, they raised peanuts up there. Okay, it's a peanut farm. And so they just nicknamed it the Goober Farm. Well, Steve Cole, which is Bill's son, he marries a gentleman we met a little earlier. Remember the postmaster of Gatlinburg, Richard Reagan? He fought in the Civil War with the Union in Calvary. He built this house, and Steve marries his daughter. I can't pronounce her name, Sharitza or something. We just always call her Kay. Okay, it's easier to say. But this is Kay and Steve here with their first few children. The little girl in the middle of them, you can see behind us, her name was Trula. She married my grandfather's brother. So we keep tying into all these families, right? So Richard sold this house to his daughter and son-in-law, and then the last time I was here, one of the ladies in the audience says, "Are those bee gums?" Yeah, they are. That's he raised bees, and his home was right on the Dicus Road. He had a lot of travelers stop in to see him. So now we're looking down on the chimneys where the road swung around. I got a picture of the Indian Gap Hotel kind of blown up there. Well, it sets, you can see the top of it right down here. Excuse me, right there. That's the top of it. And here's coming up to the Sugarlands Visitor Center, coming up to the Sugarlands Visitor Center. And there's the Indian Gap Hotel. You can hike down to those ruins still today. The reason I'm showing you this is because the Brackens, when they came in, remember they came in to avoid the Civil War. Well, Andrew Jackson Bracken was the first to come in with his family. He was married to a lady named Demarius Hamlin. And sometimes those of us who see this picture kind of laugh a little bit because she looks like she's mad at the world, you know. But the truth is, back in photography in those days, you had to wait, and you had to wait. And you had to wait until the image built, okay, with that old shadow box that they used. And so by the time you got your picture to come through, the smile was long left, okay, it was way down, so she doesn't look too happy there. But that's her daughter, Julia Bracken. Remember Julia was washing clothes and beating the paddle and pointing the guy, that's her daughter. And then her brother, Davis Bracken, is right beside her. There's some interesting stories about Davis that articles were written. Was it the Knoxville Sentinel that wrote the story about the shooting? Is that the paper? Frank, do you remember which paper?
Well, he was also in our Southern Politics.
Oh, that's true, he's in that book too.
Jasper Fenn, and I thought, no.
Yeah, they used a fake name so they wouldn't give him away in that, but, so that's, of course, Kephardt's book, Our Southern Highland, great read if you've never read that. But Davis Bracken, again, the brother and the son of Andrew Jackson and the three of Julia. Well, to kind of tie it in a little bit, Pinckney, who is Bullhead's son, Bullhead's over to the left, he marries Julia Bracken while they're living in the Sugar Lands. Here's a picture of Davis Bracken again. He marries a Cole. His wife's name was Josephine Cole in this photo. And she said to Davis's left and all of their children. Cicero's in that picture. Riley Davis is in that picture. Some of the Brackens moved down to Bradley County. We were kind of raised around their children. We used to play with them when I was a kid. But here's another picture of the two different shots of the Indian Gap Hotel. And so I'm showing you in the foreground of the top picture, see this cabin right here? That's Davis Bracken's cabin that he built. And then across from the Indian Gap Hotel, you can't hardly see it, but he built a house over here later. But his son Andy later on lived in the cabin. Both of those you can hike down to if you got good legs and you go down a steep hill.
Is his cabin the one that has the graves by it?
Davis, which cabin? Because he had two.
The one by the Indian Gap Hotel, the one that was pictured.
I'm not aware of any graves there. Frank, are you aware of graves? We need to go back down and say if there's some graves there. Don't we?
I'm aware of the house, but not the grave.
Okay, I'm not aware of the graves either.
Yeah, in one of the books it says there's 4 graves there.
Okay.
Don't believe everything you read.
We've been on a lot of wild
We
goose chases, honey.
searched in the wrong place, I think.
I'd like to know, it would be interesting to go back and try to find it. Frank's good at finding the graves, they can be found, he's good at it. With Davis, he had actually had a cabin before this one, that was his second cabin. I'm not even sure where that, you know where his first cabin
The
was?
chimney remains is that cabin, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yes. And it's supposed to be so many feet from that chimney.
Oh, okay, well, I'll go back and check that out.
I don't-
But we know Davis's place is up next to the road.
His first one.
Well, where he lived most of his life.
Oh, yeah, he's talking about the third house, yeah.
Up near the road.
Yes.
And
that was made out of solid wood.
that had a nice big rock
Big rock wall.
that the kids used to play on.
Yep.
Well, it's like a stone.
Yeah, stone wall.
They call it their whale rocks.
Yeah.
This is a photo, this picture here it's got a Fox, I can't remember his first name, but he drew up this map of what I call the Sugar Land Valley. The reason I'm showing you this, we moved down from the chimneys and where the Coles and Brackens lived, but their children moved down into this Sugar Land Valley. And in Sugar Land Valley, you had some interesting things there. To the left is called the Teacher's Cottage. Pi Beta Phi brought some teachers up into the area. To
My grandma's sister, she taught there.
Oh, wow.
And then she married a Husky.
She married Charles Husky.
Charles
didn't she?
Husky.
Yeah, because he helped build that and ended up getting a wife out of the deal.
He really took a lot of those old pictures you see in these books.
He did. Charles Husky had a library in his house. I'd love to know what happened to that.
Yeah. And his, I'm trying to think, but I don't know who wound up with the picture. Jeremy Carter told me that he had saw them and it was unreal. And like I say, a lot of them in the books, the collection she had,
He
tried to get them to give it to somebody that would save all of them.
Yes.
And
He only had one daughter and she lived in Florida. And
she owned all that and had a Cartertown back in there from the church. And
Yeah.
she called me and wanted me to go over and check on this and check on that. And there's supposed to be an Indian cemetery on that place.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But just to look at this map, this is the present day 441 going up to Van Gap. If you park where you can hike up to Husky Gap, there's a trail, it's really a road bed, that will bring you down, from the parking lot, and there's for the old store, Ernest Ogle, he had him and his wife, Lucinda, if you've ever, remember we talked about Wiley Oakley, Lucinda was his daughter, so the Roman Man of the Smokies, his little books are out there, the red books, you ought to get one of those, they're very colorful reads. But that's his daughter that had, again, who brought the old store out into the Sugar Land. And then, not to be outdone, the Skyuka Inn. I don't know where Skyuka came from, but Sam Husky built that. And his daughter, I think her name Hazel, his daughter's name was Hazel, she married Reagan, Jim Reagan. So here the Reagans are bringing the store out as well. They had a store in their home. And then Alex, remember Alex Cole? He ends up close by. Let me get to the picture of it, you can see it a whole lot better. But that photo to the upper right is the Skyuka Inn, and Alex Cole's home's right below it. So let's take a kind of a look. Close up first at the teacher's cottage. Bert Noble lived, it had a big farm in the Sugar Cane Valley. As you go down that road bed. And right across the river, he also owned land on the east side of the river as well. And he donated the land for the school, the teacher's cottage, and then also a cemetery. A lot of people know the Sugar Cane Cemetery, but it was first called the Bert Noble Cemetery with the locals. By the way, none of that's there today. All you can find is the cemetery today, none of those structures. This is my track log. When I came in, you know, when you leave Sugar Cane's Visitor Center, can y'all see my mouse pointer up there, both sides?
Yes.
Okay. If you live in Sugar Cane's Visitor Center here, and cross the bridge, first bridge going into Gatlinburg, pull off a little parking lot, and get on this trail, and you can walk it all the way up to the CC camper mains. Keep on walking, you can come up and you cut off to go to the cemetery as well. I don't have a mouse pointer, you can't see it. But you'll get up to where you go to the cemetery. If you go down toward the river, you can find some of the remains for the schoolhouse. You can't find any of the remains for the teacher's cottage that I've
My Uncle Kelly McCarter, he lived right where you went up Sugar Land Branch. His mama was a coal. But he said when he was 13 years old, he delivered the newspaper up there.
Wow. I wonder what
And he said he would go up to the teacher's cottage, and they'd always be sitting on the porch on Sunday morning waiting for the paper. And he said he'd go by the CC camp, and he said the guys never had no money, and they'd steal stuff out of the kitchen, and they'd trade it to him for a newspaper. And he would, that's why his mama got most of the groceries.
That's pretty cool, man. That's pretty good. There was actually a little footbridge just below the teacher's cottage when you cross the river to go from Bert Owen's place, and you could go up to the teacher's cottage.
Where he lived is right where Sugar Land Branch crosses the road, right on the other side.
Oh, yeah.
But I had a map, and it showed his home place on the other side, and me and Ed and Charles Hurst were coming, and I had him to help me find it. Kelly described it to me, you know, it was a big rock in the yard, and just right where it was at, and it was just like he said. Ed dialed it.
It's kind of thrilling when you can find that, isn't it? I mean, I've been on some of
But
those.
the map was wrong, it showed it on the other side of the creek.
Imagine that.
And I showed him the map, he was in his 90s before he died, and he said, no, that's not where I live. He said, it's just right across from there.
Now, the road's really high right there, which is the bridge comes down to. Pretty much for bringing this one back up is this valley, and this is where you were talking about the Sugar Land Branch community. This is Sugar Land Branch flowing down to 441, but a lot of people live, this is where Joel Whaley had most of his property. And the Husky Gap Trail, you can get to the old Husky Gap Trail. So here's that Sugar Land Valley, as I'm calling it, and that's the Dicus Road. If you look way down here, you'll see the Skyuka Inn. You know, see that there's a bridge that crosses right the river, right where the Skyuka Hotel was. Then as you come around, this is Bert Noble's farm right here, his house and barn. And then the teacher's cottage is across the river right over here. And then the store is Ernest Noble. He was the grandson of Bert Noble. His store's there right there, but you can't see the store. If you come on out, the Cole Union Cemetery sits here. And the Cole Union Cemetery is where you have a Confederate and a Union soldier both buried in the same graveyard. And here's a picture of Ernest Noble on the store. And that's the front of the store right there. Here's a close-up of the Skyuka Inn. All you can find today is where the fireplace was. That's about all you can find back in the woods. Picture of Sam Husky, who built it. And remember we talked about Alex Cole. This is his house right here. Remember his grandson of the original Cole to come in. They moved his home up on the Roaring Fork Trail. If you do that Motor Lodge Trail, his cabin has been moved up there. You can still see it today. Now, to show you this photo, the yellow line is the present day 441. The blue line is the Dicus Road that kind of came back around. When it joined up to the modern day road, it's a real sharp hairpin curve and it becomes the same road again. This little dotted line trail is a little sled road trail that'll take you back into the Sugar Land Branch County. That's where my grandmother was born. And she was born in an area that most people know as the Rock Garden. Remember the question, John Bullhead Whaling, and people always asking me, which came first? Was Bullhead named after the mountain, or was the mountain named after Bullhead? Kind of like which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, if you'll see this artist rendering, most of the old timers thought Mount LeConte looked like the back of a bull, and then the mountain right below it looked like a bull's head. And when you're up on Anakeeston, you can see off so good from way up there on top of the mountain. If you look back with the sun hitting it, man, you can see that it's just like a bull laying there. It really does. So Bullhead, remember, got all these John Whaleys. He's John Whaley in Greenbrier. When he comes and buys land from his brother-in-law and moves to the base of Bullhead Mountain, he gets a new name. Now you're Bullhead John Whaley, so we can figure you out the rest. So the mountain was first to answer the question. So here he is, Bullhead John Whaley. He even has a bullhead look to him, doesn't he? And then his son, Pinckney. Pinckney's the brother of Joel. So we talked about Pinckney and Greenbrier. Joel stayed in the Sugarlands area. Oh, there's my alarm for my wife telling me to shut up. Okay. Let me finish up real quick. Joel kind of settled in to the Sugarlands branch area. He bought a lot of land for the Huskies and owned a big farm up there. He was also kind of a squire, justice of the peace. He owned a lot of wagons and farms, and so the people in the area would get their crops. Let Joel take them down to Sevierville and sell them in his wagons. And then Joel, being the entrepreneur that he was, he would send the wagons back home with some of his workers. He'd stay in Sevierville an extra day on Monday because they did the farmer's market on Saturday and Sunday. And he'd hang around in the courthouse along in the yard area, and if they couldn't find enough men to do jury duty, they'd go outside and say, hey, you want to be on jury duty? He made $1.25 a day, so that's big money. So Joe just made him some extra money before he came back home, and he was open to pick for the jury duty. Now here's one of your Huskies, and this Husky married a noble. This is James Wesley Husky, and he's a grandson to old Isaac. He was the father of Peggy Husky, which is my grandmother's grandmother, and then married Joe Whalen. So here we have old Isaac. We have his grandson, James Wesley. James Wesley just built cabins all over the place. He lived everywhere. He lived up above Elkmont before it was Elkmont in the Little River community. He lived up on Meggs Mountain. He just lived all over. And so Martha Jane Husky Ogle, he's her great-grandnephew, and then this is her great-granddaughter that he married. I'm trying to see her name. I forgot what her name is. Anyway, if you look on down, you've got these three that are the children of James Wesley. Well, this is my grandmother's grandmother, and her two brothers, Isaac, Bradley, and Aaron. The reason I'm showing you Aaron is we've got a picture here, Charles Husky. We talked about Charles, had all the pictures in his home. This is my grandfather and my uncle. They were good friends. My grandfather, Charles Husky, were contemporaries of each other. They both worked for the railroad at the same time a little bit. And they did their memoirs and a lot of their research together on their family history. And another gentleman, not pictured here, was Sam Carter that did also work for them.
Charles would be my great uncle. He was married to my grandma's sister.
Yeah, Charles,
Youngest sister.
This is him right here, is a little boy in the lap of his daddy Aaron. So, again, this is my grandmother's parents. This is William Carter, and this is Labisha, her parents. And then that's my grandmother's little baby on the lap. And kind of a little interesting tale. I'll try to be quick, but here's William Carter down here. When he come in as a little 15-year-old young man, his mother remarried after her father got killed in the Civil War, lost Elisha Wilbur Carter. He died actually in the Andersonville prison camps down in Georgia. Died of cholera. He's in one of those mass graves down there. But with his mother remarried, he's a little, I guess, footloose and fancy free, wanted to get away from home, maybe didn't like his stepdad, I don't know. But then Caroline was a first cousin to Joel, and Joel had become a successful businessman farmer up in the Sugarland Branch area, so she brought her son over to see if Joel could do anything with him, so they put him to work as a lieutenant farmer, and that's where he met and married Elisha. Caroline's mother was Martha Whalen. She was the sister to Bullhead, so Joel Carolina, first cousins. So here's the Parton family, not all of them, just a few. This is the first 9 of the Parton children, all of them raised in this little bitty log cabin. This is Joel's barn. They called it a turnaround barn because you could pull a wagon in the loft and unload its hay. And then I kind of tried to do a little hand drawing and showing this rock garden. My grandparents, her family, they built this garden around these rocks around the garden, rock wall, to keep the hogs and the cows out of the garden. And then here we have Joel, one of the last pictures with 3 of his brothers sitting on the front porch of his house. I was at the branch. But just to close out, I'll end with this. Remember we talked about Alex Cove and then William LaBash's children? Well, their son Fred, who's the oldest, and then the third son, Hugh, they married Alex Cove's daughters, Cora Cove and Mag Cove. Have any of you ever eaten that or know about the Parton Deli? Does that ring a bell? The Parton Deli, as you're going down just past the Italy Golf and so forth. It's where the famous car is. Remember the car that's kind of exploded on the internet, YouTube? Okay, that's Fred's grandson, David. And then Dennis and his dad, Henry, started the Parton Deli in 1974. Well, that's their claim to fame. Hubert's daughter, Hubert Magco's daughter, was Pauline, and they had a son named Rex. When they had the Greyhound bus station in Gatlinburg the other day, they had a lunch counter. Rex used to run the lunch counter. Later on, he opened Omar's restaurant down in the Parkway. And then Pauline, she married a gentleman named Tommy Hughes. They had Tommy's Restaurant, if you ever remember from the 60s, 70s, Tommy's Restaurant out in Gatlinburg. So that's their claim to fame as well. So folks, that ends my little talk here about family, places, clans, communities. I've got photos up here. If anybody just wants a souvenir photo, I would just like to be reimbursed for my dreams. I'll give it to you at my cost. But I've also got some books on the families, the Whaleys, the Partons, the Ownbys. I'm not trying to push these. I just brought them in case somebody wanted some. And all I do, I don't try to profit off history. I just try to get back where I got in. Basically, so you're welcome to come up here and look. And thank you very much for your attention.